Welcome to Calvary Fellowship in Manchester, New Hampshire. We meet here in Manchester every Sunday to worship in song and in the Word of God. We hope you are encouraged by the music and the teaching.
Great are you, Lord, mighty in strength. You are faithful, you will ever be. We will praise you all of our days. It's for your glory, we offer everything. Raise your hands, all you nations, shout to God, all creation. How awesome is the Lord Most High. We will praise you together, for now and forever. How awesome is the Lord Most High.
Since we're celebrating the guys who've sacrificed their lives for us, I thought we'd take a look at the preambles, and I didn't put the preamble to the Declaration of Independence in its entirety, but I will give you some of the rest of it as well. But just these first verses are really significant. And those people who try to take God out of our heritage and say we're not a Judeo-Christian nation, that the Founding Fathers were not Christians, they lie, because they ignore the preambles to each of these major documents, and they also ignore who the people were. Of the 56 people who signed the Declaration of Independence, 29 were ministers, including the one that started American Bible Society, one was the president of Princeton University, the ones that started Sunday school in America. Clearly they were Christians. So the way the preamble of the Declaration of Independence reads, it doesn't say we hold these statements to be reasonably accurate, that can be determined by people who've graduated from college and have at least a PhD, and that somehow these rights came to us by evolution, and the government can determine which rights you should have because they know better than you do. And as far as life, the government can determine which lives are really valuable, which lives are not, when we should end life, when life should begin, and the government will determine really what property you should have or not have. If they find a better use for it, then obviously you have no complaint. And they'll determine what happiness really is. Of course, that's not what it says. It says we hold these truths to be self-evident. Anybody with half a brain will know what these truths are. If they have any time at all to spend time in the Word, they'll know what the truth really is. But see, they don't want you to know that. That all men are created equal. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to achieve the same success in the world, because what's success? Everyone is created equal. Everyone has equal opportunity to use the gifts that God has given them as God would have them use them. Today we've decided that everybody should be treated exactly equal, and somehow we'll hold everybody down so that everybody progresses at the same rate and at the same level. Yet the statistic in today's paper said 51% of the college graduates under the age of 25 are working in jobs that require a college degree. The other 49% are not. So what does that tell you? If you're in the bottom half of your class, you probably wasted your parents' money, and you're going to be working at McDonald's anyway. So if you take the money that college is going to cost, put it in the bank, roll over for 20 years, work at McDonald's, retire as a millionaire with no stress. Why waste your time going to college, right? So we don't have good mechanics, we don't have good carpenters, because we make everybody go to college, and then they wonder why they can't get jobs. So we're not equal as far as our abilities or our talents, but we have equal opportunity. And of course, they acknowledge that the rights we do have come from our Creator. And of course, we know who the Creator is because we're studying John. And John said, who was the beginning? Who was the Creator? Jesus was. So we know that the rights we have are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Nobody can challenge those rights. Those rights come from God. They don't come from the government. The government has no right to take them away from you. They come from God. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Why did they put those three? Life, of course, is the most meaningful thing we have. The right to have our life and to determine what we want to do with our life. It's not up to the government to do that for you. It's not up to them to determine when your life is valuable and when it isn't, when they should terminate your life, when life actually begins. Sort of a sad statistic that since Roe versus Wade, 1/3 of the children that would have been born have been aborted. So the most dangerous place to be in the world is in the womb between conception and birth. That's a greater risk than all the wars we've ever been in, a greater statistic than all the natural disasters we've had. More people have been killed in the womb. 50 million people that would have been American citizens have been killed because somebody decided that you have the right to terminate life. And that's not what the Founding Fathers had in mind. We have the liberty to achieve the American dream. We have the liberty to use all of our talents to the best of our ability. So we are free to do that. That's what they were looking at. They had been under the pressure of Rome originally, under the pressure of England at this point, where they were not being properly represented, taxes were being imposed upon them, their liberties were restricted, they had to house troops in their homes, their weapons and their ammunition have been taken away in many cases. And lastly, the pursuit of happiness. What is happiness? Okay, different people is different things, but to us it's really the American dream. What they were thinking of is they would have the right to own property. They would have the right to make decisions for themselves. They have the right to raise their children the way they saw fit in the eyes of God. This was all part of the pursuit of happiness. And they said that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So we have government for what reason? To preserve those rights, not to sacrifice them to the government. Deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. It's not their ball game, it's our ball game. They get their power, the government gets its power from the people, from the consent of the government. So when you have 93% of the people opposed to something, and they go ahead and pass it anyway, they're obviously violating the intent of the Declaration of Independence. It's the consent of the governed. And then when they wrote the Constitution, 12 years later, having tried the Articles of Confederation, which didn't work because we had 13 basically independent countries, each printing their own currency, each entering into agreements with other countries, it didn't work. Now, obviously, if you had to travel from Rhode Island to Massachusetts and change money, somebody'd rip you off. Especially if you're coming to Massachusetts, you could count on that. And going to Rhode Island, they'd really rip you off. So you'd lose both ways. So we knew that wasn't going to work. So when they started that preamble, said, we the people, notice, not the government, not some intelligentsia from the academia, said, we the people of the United States. And why are we doing this? In order to form a more perfect union, because we're sort of shaky with 13 colonies, establish justice, not social justice, you don't see any words social in front of that, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, in other words, let's have peace between the states, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare. No, such a general welfare, not the welfare of each individual little group that thinks they should have special privileges and special rights. The general welfare. In other words, we want to provide the best for the country as a whole. The nation should be our primary responsibility, not individual states competing with each other, not individual hyphenated groups competing with each other, not particular lifestyles competing with each other, but the general welfare. And notice it already said, provide for the common defense. So when we get down to the Second Amendment, obviously it wasn't just because they didn't have a provision to provide for defense already. So it wasn't just for the militia. The Second Amendment obviously was to allow you to continue to have your weapons, as the court recently ruled in Washington, D.C.'s case. And secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves, to our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. So the preamble tells us why they were doing it. So they like to skip over the preambles and just jump into the Constitution itself and sort of pick and choose what part they want to believe. The preamble of each document tells you why they were doing it, what their thoughts were, what were the intentions of the Founding Fathers. And these are the same people, some of the same people that did the Declaration of Independence did the Constitution. And when they want to pick out guys, they try to pick out the least religious of the people, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. But Benjamin Franklin is the one, when he was doing the Constitution, said, let's wait and seek the will of the Lord as we did with the Declaration of Independence. This is a deist, but he still knew that God had to be involved if they were going to get it right. So these people all knew that there was a need to have God involved in what they were doing.